From the International Media Center in San Antonio, Texas, a special presentation from John Hagee Ministries. Today, Pastor John Hagee teaches exclusively to our television and radio audience a prophecy series entitled The Oil Crisis and the Road to Armageddon. And now, Pastor John Hagee.
Welcome to this very special prophecy series. This urgent and compelling prophetic series will be on our telecast for 5 days. As I'm speaking to you, Russia has invaded Georgia and is defying America and the West. The International Atomic Energy Agency now believes that Syria is operating a secret nuclear program. Iran is racing toward nuclear weapons, and when they have those nuclear weapons, has promised to attack Israel and the United States. President Ahmadinejad of Iran has made it clear he intends to do just that. The ultimate weapon of the war in which we presently find ourselves is oil. Therefore, I have made this poster that says, "The Oil Crisis and the Road to Armageddon." America is facing an oil crisis that affects every person watching this program and threatens the national security of the United States of America. Ezekiel spoke of the hook in the jaw. I believe that oil is the hook in the jaw that's leading the nations of the world toward the Middle East on the road to Armageddon. This urgent and compelling prophetic series is made for television only. I want you to hear every word. Our title, The Oil Crisis and the Road to Armageddon. I will address the following issues in these 5 telecasts. Our first telecast was The Oil Crisis in America and How It Affects You. The second telecast, The Rise and Fall of America. Is America going to survive the moral and economic free fall in which we find ourselves? The third telecast was Israel and Iran, the nuclear showdown. You don't want to miss that telecast. And then the fourth telecast, which is today, we're talking about the European Union and the rebirth of the Roman Empire. The fifth and final telecast will be The Road to Armageddon, the Russian Islamic invasion of Israel. Now, a word from my announcer, and I'll be right back. Thank you for rejoining us on this, our 4th presentation in this prophetic series. And this is the European Union, the rebirth of the Roman Empire. The rebirth of the old Roman Empire is happening before our very eyes. You see it every day on the television, and you read it in the newspaper. Before he died, Sir Winston Churchill said, "We must build a United States of Europe." That is becoming a reality. T.R. Reid said, and I quote, "At the dawn of the 21st century, a geopolitical revolution of historic dimensions is underway, the reunification of Europe." 25 nations have joined together with another dozen or so on the waiting list to build a common economy, a government, and a culture unlike anything ever. Europe is more integrated today than at any time in the Roman Empire. How long can the world endure terrorist attacks like 9/11? Terrorist attacks that disrupt oil supplies, terrorist attacks that produce nuclear weapons, that can produce dirty bombs, that can produce missiles, that can produce an escalating Middle East crisis that are daily threats to the survival of Western civilization. What the world is now looking for, and I'm quoting other people, is another Caesar, another all-powerful Roman Empire that will rule humanity with a fist of iron. That empire has been born. That empire has not come to its brutal fist of power, but it will. You now see it in its Genesis element known as the European Union. That Caesar will soon come to being, and the world will call him in due time the Antichrist. That iron-fisted control will monitor every purchase on planet Earth of every person, every hour of every day. You will not be able to buy a loaf of bread or a bottle of milk without it being recorded. The irony of this drama is that the prophet Daniel told us in great detail about this over 2,500 years ago. He told it in such great detail, it is undeniable. The Jewish people were nearing the end of their 70 years of captivity with the Babylonians. Now listen to this. Daniel was among those Jewish captives, and he had these questions that he wanted to ask God. He said, God, you have promised our father Abraham that we have a covenant to have an eternal land, the promised land. I'm asking you, God, these questions. Are you finished with the Jewish people? Now, when you've lived in captivity all of your life in a foreign country, away from your country, that's a legitimate question. And secondly, he said, will God be faithful to his covenant with Abraham? Will you give the land of Israel back to the Jewish people? Thirdly, will the kingdom promised to King David become a reality? And fourthly, is the Messiah really coming, and will he ever rule over all the earth? This is something that Daniel asked God, and God is so faithful to his covenant that God gave to Daniel two dreams, the interpretation of two dreams. And I'm going to talk to you about that in these telecasts. I'll begin at Daniel 2, verses 31 and following. When Daniel is interpreting the dream of Nebuchadnezzar, he says, Thou, O king, you saw, and behold, a great image. This great image, whose brightness was excellent, stood before thee, and the form thereof was terrible. This image head was of fine gold, his breast and arms of silver, his belly and thighs of brass, his legs of iron, his feet part of iron and part of clay. You saw till a stone that was cut without hands, which smote the image upon its feet, that were of iron and clay, and broke them in pieces. Then was the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, and the gold broken to pieces together, and became like the chaff of the summer threshing floors. And the wind carried them away, that no place was found for them, that the stone that smote the image became a great mountain, and filled the whole earth. This is the dream, and we will tell you the interpretation, O king, of this dream. And then Daniel proceeded to tell the king the interpretation of the dream. Now, this is how that happened. Daniel saw the end of the world. God revealed to him the nations that would come upon the stage of history in the sequence in which they would appear, and the personality and manner of warfare that they would employ to secure their international and global dominance. I want to give you first a personal profile of Daniel. His name means, God is my judge. That's what Daniel means. His divine gift was understanding visions and dreams and knowing the unknowable. God said in the book of Deuteronomy that he would reveal the secret things to his children, and he was specifically speaking to the Jewish people in this instance, because this is one of the times that God, through a divine revelation of the future, told Daniel exactly what was going to happen, just as he told Ezekiel in Ezekiel 38:39 what was going to happen to the children of Israel, or to the nation of Israel when they became a nation again. He was captured by Nebuchadnezzar around the year 616 BC and was taken to Babylon, which you will recognize to be the land of Iraq, where he was trained for palace service. Although he was brought to Babylon as a slave and he was brought in chains, think about this, he rose to the rank of prime minister and lived 70 years as an advisor to the king of Babylon. Now, for those of you who think you're handicapped in your career, put yourself in that position. Look at what Daniel had to overcome. He came in chains. He didn't know the language. He was a member of a hated minority. He came over with captives, but he ended up riding in chariots. I want to stop to say to each of you who think that you're in a dead-end job, if God is with you, you can ride in the chariot. The favor of God is with you. There's nothing that you cannot accomplish. The vision of Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, dreamed a dream, and he forgot the dream. This is Bible proof of what I often say, that when you go to work for government, the first thing to go is your brain. They couldn't remember. They couldn't remember. The politicians just simply couldn't remember. Nebuchadnezzar called on his magicians to power to dialogue with demons by incantation. I want you to hear that. Nebuchadnezzar had people that lived communicating to demons through music. Some of the music I've heard lately that you call hard rock must be what they were listening to. Astrologers' power to know the will of gods and predict the future by stars. That was what many people followed when Gene Dixon was alive. Sorcerers are those who communicate with the dead. And that's becoming a Hollywood theme. The movie Ghost projects that. Nebuchadnezzar forgot the dream, and he demanded of his physicians and his astrologers and sorcerers to tell him the dream that he forgot. Now think about that. He motivated them by saying, and this is recorded in the Bible, "If you do not make known to me the dream and the interpretation, you shall be cut in pieces, and your houses shall be made an ash heap." Now that's a motivational speech if I've ever heard one. They responded, "O king, no man on earth can tell the king this answer." Nebuchadnezzar began to kill the wise men, and they went to Daniel and said, "Help us." Daniel went to the king and said, "Wait, I can give you the interpretation of the dream, but me and my friends need time to pray." I could stop here and preach an hour flat-footed, but I'm going to hurry by this. When you don't know what to do, don't call the psychic hotline. Kneel and talk to God. He can give you the answer. Jeremiah 33:3 says, "Call upon me, and I will answer you and show you great and mighty things that you know not." The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is the God who answers prayer. Elijah prayed, and fire came from heaven. Joshua prayed, and the sun stood still. Daniel prayed, and hungry lions laid down in silent slumber. And on this occasion he prayed, and God gave to him the dream that another man had dreamed, and then gave to him the exact interpretation of that dream. So I'm saying to you again that prayer should not ever be your last chance. It should be your first choice. Why did God give Daniel the revelation to the dream? It's the only time that God gave one man the total picture of the end of the world. Daniel saw it all. If you want to know the panorama of prophecy, it's all found in Daniel 2 and in Daniel 7. Because God had given Abraham, the father of the Jewish people, the title deed to the land of Israel in Genesis, and God was wanting Daniel to know that I have not broken my covenant to the Jewish people, and that you are going to be returned to your land. Genesis 17:8 says, "And I will give to you, Abraham, and to your seed after you," that would be the Jewish people, "to the exclusion of Ishmael, for an everlasting possession, the land of Israel." The fact is that the nations of the world are now fighting over Israel, and specifically the city of Jerusalem. It is the will of God that Israel and the city of Jerusalem be under the control of the Jewish people exclusively forever. God does not change his mind. God, he says, "I am the Lord and I never change." God does not break covenant. He said, "I am the Lord that keeps covenant for 1,000 years." So it is the will of a sovereign God for the Jewish people to control the nation of Israel and the city of Jerusalem. I'll be back in just a moment to continue after this word. Thank you for rejoining us. We continue with the thought that God is confirming to Daniel the fact that the covenant that he made with Abraham was still in place. God does not break covenant. But a tragic thing had happened to the Jewish people in Daniel's day. They had been promised the land of Israel by God himself, but now they had been in captivity all of their adult lives. Daniel and the Jewish people were asking God, "Why did you take us out of our land? Will we ever get back to our land? And will Israel ever again become our possession? And is Messiah coming?" God gave this dream to Daniel, a Jewish prophet, so that he could tell the Jewish people and all humanity forever that the kingdoms that would rule over the nation of Israel from the time of Daniel until the second coming of Jesus Christ. Now, please understand, many people confuse the rapture of the church and the second coming. The rapture of the church could happen at any time, but the second coming is going to happen at the end of the tribulation. It will happen exactly 7 years after the Antichrist signs the covenant of treaty with the nation of Israel. But focus now on the dream of Nebuchadnezzar. Notice that when we give this picture, that Daniel said there was a head of gold. The head of gold was Nebuchadnezzar. And then there was silver, and then there was brass, and then there was iron, and then there was iron and clay in the feet. You notice as the metals go down from gold to silver, brass, etc., as they go down, they decrease in value and they increase in strength. The symbolic message here is that the military power gets stronger and the morality of man gets weaker. Each metal presents a major empire that will rule the world, its military force stronger than the one before it. The 5 kingdoms, and these are given in the Bible, and this is given in Daniel, the 2nd chapter, verse 32. The Bible says, "Thou, O king, are the head of gold." I'm going to read that to you because some of you think he's making this up. This image head was of gold, his breast and his arms of silver, his belly and his thighs of brass, his legs of iron, his feet part of iron and part of clay. And then he says, "O king," in verse 37, "you are the King of kings, for the God of heaven has given you power, strength, and glory. And you, O king, are the head of gold." So I'm not interpreting that. God interpreted it for us. So the first king in the sequence of kings is Nebuchadnezzar. He is the first empire to rule over the Jewish people. Nebuchadnezzar conquered Jerusalem in 616 BC. Nebuchadnezzar, by the way, was the hero of Saddam Hussein before he was hung. The second kingdom, the breastplate with 2 irons and silver, is represented in Daniel 2:32, is the Medo-Persian Empire. Its 2 arms symbolize 2 nations. The Medes under Darius conquered the Babylonians, and then they united with the Persians to form the second great world empire. The third empire was brass. When you read Daniel 2:39, this is Alexander the Great. And this is the empire that he brought into being in 334 BC. I want you to hear this historical note about Alexander the Great. 270 years after Daniel wrote his vision of the future, Alexander the Great and his army marched to Jerusalem. And as he neared the city, the high priest of Israel went out to meet Alexander the Great, and he read to them the writings of Daniel describing the military technique of Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great was so impressed that he said, "I'm not going to destroy Jerusalem," and instead he went into the temple to worship. He was amazed at the accuracy of Daniel. Alexander the Great, 270 years after the fact, recognized the accuracy of this Jewish prophet. Tragic that people in the 21st century don't even know who Daniel was. Alexander the Great died at the age of 33. He divided his kingdom into 4 parts, and it was with 4 generals. Alexander the Great made Greek the world language. Now let me tell you why this is important. Greek is the most exact language on the earth. I almost pulled my hair out when I was in seminary studying Greek. It was the language in which the New Testament was written to avoid any misunderstanding. In English, you can use the word love, and love means many things to many people. I love this, I love that, it means nothing. But when you say love in Greek, there's a deep love, which is agape. There's brotherly love, which is phileo. There's the love of money. There's the love of self. There's the love of pleasure. There's the love of hospitality. And there's the love of God. There are 7 different kinds of love. When you read the Greek word that talks about love, you know exactly what kind of love it's talking about. I believe that God allowed Alexander the Great to conquer the world so that this Bible, the New Testament, could be written in Greek, because that makes it the most exact writing on the face of the earth. You can't get it wrong if you read the original text as it was given. The fourth kingdom that comes into power is in Daniel 2:40, and that fourth kingdom is the Roman Empire. Rome ruled the world with an iron fist. Rome crushed all previous empires, but collapsed from within because of moral decay. If you follow the rise and fall of Rome, you will see a picture of America, of how we have risen and we are now falling. The feet of iron and clay. Iron and clay speaks of two substances that will not mix. This is the image that Nebuchadnezzar saw, the feet of iron and clay. I believe the iron and clay was democracy and radical Islam, mixtures that will not blend. Daniel is saying the last world government would be represented by a theocratic dictatorship and democracies. A final outcome of that iron will overlap, and the final governments on earth will be a dictatorship. And then he talks about the 10 toes in the feet of those two, and the feet of the image. Those 10 toes represent 10 governments. The last world government before the second coming of Christ will be 10 governments. These 10 governments will rule during the tribulation period for the first 3.5 years, and then the Antichrist will conquer 3 of those 10 governments and rule the world. That's why you read in the book of Revelation that I saw the beast that had 7 heads and 10 crowns. 7 heads because the Antichrist has conquered 3 nations, and he now rules 7, but he has set 10 crowns. In verse 45, the stone without hands becomes a great mountain, and it smites the image. Daniel saw a stone come and hit this image, and it hit it with such force that it pulverized it. He said that the stone became as the wheat of the summer threshing floor. It was literally atomized. The stone cut without hands is Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ is the cornerstone, precious and elect in Zion. That's why the Bible says, upon this rock have I built my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. In Daniel 2:44, and in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed. It will break in pieces and consume all other kingdoms, and his kingdom shall stand forever. We pray when we pray the Lord's Prayer, for thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. The Bible says, and of his kingdom there shall be no end. Daniel saw that when he saw this image that had a head of gold, and then the sequential metals that went down to the feet, and then he saw this stone cut without hand strike that image and blast it until it was like shucks of the summer threshing floor. That means when Jesus Christ comes back to earth, the stone cut without hands, he's going to annihilate the governments of the world, and he himself will set up his kingdom that will become an eternal kingdom, and of his kingdom there shall be no end. You know, if I didn't believe the Bible, I would find myself a rubber room and pound my head into the wall at least once a day. Because you can see that the world is going down the tubes. You can see an absolute, an absolutely uninformed person can see that the globe in which we live is racing toward a final conflict in which all of humanity is looking for a way to destroy everyone that disagrees with them. We have the clash of civilizations just before us. What is going to happen? What's going to be the end of all of this? Yes, God is going to allow humanity to destroy one another. God has always given man free will. It's not God's will, it's man's stupid, uncontrollable, demonically driven will that makes all of this nightmare become a reality. But in the final analysis, God is going to say, I'm going to let you have your opportunity. You've rejected my message. You've rejected my Son. So I'm going to let you have your Messiah, which is the Antichrist, and he's going to set up a kingdom. And when he sets up that kingdom, I'm going to crush it. I'm going to annihilate it. And when it's done, I'm going to set up a kingdom that will never end. Never, never end. And of his kingdom there shall be no end. Thank you for joining us today as we talk about the road to Armageddon and why World War III has already begun. The disease of political correctness prevents America from admitting the obvious. World War III has begun. The battle for the survival of Western civilization is now engaged. Recently, Iran's President Ahmadinejad was reported in the Islamic Republic News as saying, quote, Israel is on the verge of disappearing, end of quote. A nation disappearing can only happen through a nuclear holocaust. You can be sure that as soon as Iran has nuclear weapons, they will be used against Israel and then the United States of America. Recently, a British master spy, Eliza Bueller, shocked the world by saying, and I quote, 1,600 terrorists in 200 cells in England are plotting acts of terror against both England and America, end of quote. Get those numbers in your mind. 1,600 terrorists in 200 cells are plotting acts of terror right now. In my latest book, Jerusalem Countdown, I give you the FBI report, which identifies 8 U.S. cities that the radical Islam has targeted to be blown up simultaneously. The purpose is to crush the will of the American people to resist the rule of radical Islam. In this message, I want to cover some of these points: the definition of world war, the justification that World War III has begun, when did this threat start, why are we now being attacked, is the radical Islamic faith peaceful, with whom are we at war, can we lose this war, and what losing this war will mean to you and to America. Jesus said to his disciples in Matthew, the 24th chapter and the 3rd verse, and as he sat upon the Mount of Olives, the disciples came unto him privately, saying, Tell us, when shall these things be, and what shall be the sign of your coming and of the end of the world? Now let me talk about the end of the world. The end of the there's not going to be technically an end of the world, but it will be the end of the world as we know it. The world has changed since 9/11. That world is gone forever. But I assure you, whenever nuclear weapons start falling, it will be the end of the world as we know it. The Bible very clearly teaches that God is going to recreate the world in the book of Revelation to make it like the Garden of Eden, because man will have so polluted it with nuclear proliferation that it has to be recreated for man to have habitation here. So there's going to be a beautiful world, but man is going to do his absolute best, according to the words of Bible prophets, to destroy it, but God will remake it. So when the disciples are asking him about the end of the world is not going to be in a literal sense, but it will be in a sense the literal world as you know it. What is the definition of world war? When the major nations of the world are fighting a specific cause against a common enemy. In World War II, America, England, France, and Russia called themselves allies, and they fought Germany, Italy, and Japan, which were Axis powers. The world was at war. As shocking as it sounds, America and Israel are the only two democracies fighting radical Islam. And please, when I'm speaking in this text today, I'm speaking about radical Islam. President Bush said this nation is at war with radical Islamic fascists. Rush Limbaugh said this is a religious war and there is no room for compromise in a religious war. He's right. Cal Thomas, commentator, said, quote, "It is life or death. We want to live and they want us dead." Are there any questions? We had better overthrow them before they overthrow us. Who can doubt their ultimate objective? End of quote. The justification that World War III has begun. Consider the parade of nations who are now at war. America's new Pearl Harbor was 9/11 when 19 radical Islamics, 15 of which were from Saudi Arabia, hijacked commercial airliners and flew them as missiles of death into the Twin Towers in New York City. Approximately 2,700 people died that day, but many more died as a consequence. A third flight, the United Airlines Flight 93, was hijacked and was crashed in Pennsylvania when American passengers charged the terrorists barehanded under the mantra, "Let's roll." It was American heroism in its greatest form. The plane was destined for the White House. May God bless the sacred memory of those American heroes who crashed that plane into the countryside in Pennsylvania. A fourth flight, American Airlines Flight 77, was hijacked and crashed into the Pentagon. America's symbols of power and pride were in smoldering ruins. When it was all over, more than 6,000 were killed in 4 crashes. This was America's new day of infamy. It was the worst attack on American soil since the British burned the White House in the early 1800s. It removed the idea from the mind of the American people that we could not be attacked by a foreign power. We now know that radical Islam has the will to destroy us. They just don't have the power. If Iran gets their hands on nuclear power, believe me, they will use that power to destroy America and Israel. That's the political fog in which America must shake itself and come to reality. Ladies and gentlemen, we are in a war for our survival. England is at war with radical Islam. On July the 7th, 2005 in London, Islamic terrorists exploded bombs in 3 underground trains and a double-decker bus, killing 52 people and injuring more than 700. Just a few days ago, British police arrested 24 Islamic terrorists who planned to blow up 10 passenger planes simultaneously who were flying between Britain and America. This was to be mass murder on a monumental proportion, which was an act of war. Russia and China are supporting Iran, and Iran is the head of the global Islamic terrorism. We are a world at war. Iran is working night and day to get these nuclear weapons, and they have made it very clear that they intend to put missiles together, and if they get nuclear weapons, those missiles will have nuclear heads that will have the ability to hit Jerusalem, London, and New York simultaneously. Think about the utter chaos Western civilization would be in if that happened. And they're working day and night to make it happen, and they're not being very quiet about it. They're saying, we're going to do it, and you can't stop us. If you think it's impossible, the president of Iran recently said, quote, "We shall soon experience a world without the United States and Zionism," end of quote. That was quoted from the Islamic Republic News Agency. He later said, President Ahmadinejad said, that Israel should be blown off the map. Mr. Ahmadinejad, if you're watching this telecast or any of your friends, let me tell you something. People who threaten Israel are threatening the very powers of heaven itself, because God has sworn to defend the Jewish people. David said, "He that keepeth Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps." I remind you that Pharaoh threatened to kill the Jewish people, and God made him fish food in one afternoon. When you threatened Israel, you may be talking about disappearing in a sudden storm yourself, but not Israel. Israel is here, and Israel is here to stay. And you and all radical Islamic people need to get that in your mind, that the God of heaven is the defender of Israel, and he does not sleep and he does not slumber. He's very, very aware of what's going on in the world. America's leaders try to comfort us by saying Iran can't possibly have nuclear weapons. That's wrong. North Korea has nuclear weapons. They fired them last July at Japan to parade their nuclear power. Iran is swimming in oil money. They have the ability to buy nuclear power from North Korea any day of the week. Continue with the validation that the world is at war with radical Islam. There's America, England, France, and Israel that have been attacked by radical Islam. Recently, Islamic terrorists were arrested in Canada with 3 times the explosive used in the Murray building in Oklahoma City. Their objective was to capture Canada's prime minister and cut his head off. That was their testimony. This is an act of war. Spain is at war with radical Islam. Bombs explode on 3 commuter trains in Madrid on March the 11th, 2004. It killed 200 people plus and injured 1,400. Islamic leaders told Spain to take their troops out of Iraq. Spain bowed to the demands of radical Islam immediately, so Spain is finished. They have now bowed to the power of radical Islam. Throw in the Islamic attacks in Pakistan, Afghanistan, Yemen, Kuwait, the Philippines, Egypt, Turkey, Bangladesh, and Thailand, all of those experiencing this phenomenon of attack by radical Islam. The world is at war. They are at war against a common enemy, and it is a civilizational crash. It is the clash of kingdoms. It is the clash that will not stop until one defeats the other. I'll be right back after this word from my announcer to tell you what will happen next in the Middle East. Stay tuned. Thank you for rejoining us. What's going to happen next in the Middle East? Right now, you see Russia invading Georgia. Russia is going to continue to behave in a very aggressive and hostile manner toward NATO and every NATO nation. They're going to continue to be increasingly hostile to the United States of America because we are the superpower that Russia hates most. Russia is going to try to control the oil. That's why they're in Georgia. That oil pipeline, they want to control that, and they want to have a seaport through which they can reach Russia. They are going to increasingly become, as Ezekiel said, the captain of the Islamic horde. You will watch Russia continue to ingratiate itself to Iran and to other radical Islamic nations. Why? Because they, Russia, are saying, we want the oil to be a superpower, and radical Islam is saying, you give us the military guidance, and we want to conquer Israel and Jerusalem. That is the merging of 2 powerful forces for the purpose of destroying the nation of Israel. In a previous telecast in this prophecy series, I tell you how that Ezekiel says that Russia will lead this huge Islamic army against Israel, and God is going to crush that army. It's going to be such a devastating defeat for Russia and the Islamic nations that their military power will be destroyed forever, and the people of Israel will recognize that the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is God, and there is no other. Now, you can watch that happen in the news media that you're reading, but it was given to us by Daniel and Ezekiel 2,500 years ago, and it's more accurate than what you're seeing on the evening telecast. Why was America attacked on 9/11? Why does radical Islam hate us? It's not our support of Israel. Only someone silly enough to believe the New York Times would believe that. They hate us because it's their religious duty to hate us. Radical Islam is a doctrine of death. Christianity is a doctrine of life. It is their desire, it is their hope, it is their ambition, it is their highest honor to die for Allah, fighting a radical or fighting someone who's not Islamic, so that they can go to heaven and have those 70 virgins. An infidel is a Christian or a Jew, And the only way a Christian or a Jew can escape decapitation is to be a convert. Radical Islam teaches their children in elementary school to love death just like we love life. Once you get that in your mind, you can begin to understand something about the mindset of Radical Islam. They hate us because we're free. Radical Islam hates freedom. They want to turn the clock back to the 7th century, which was the Dark Ages. Women cannot be free to drive a car. Women should not be able to go to school. Women should not have the opportunity to work in a public job. The man must be able to punish his wife, literally whip her if he wishes to. He may divorce her for any reason and may put her out penniless. You have been watching on Fox News recently the concept of honor killings. Those are happening in America, but they have been happening in the radical Islamic faith for centuries. Simply stated, if I was radical Islam and my daughter was dating someone that I thought was not of our faith, I would have a license to kill her and do so with God's blessing. Or if she was just dating someone I didn't like and I thought it was an offense to me, I would have the right to kill her. That's their belief. That's not rational, but it is the belief of radical Islam when it comes to honor killings. Islam calls Jewish people apes and pigs. They call Christians those who incur Allah's wrath. All must do these things. One, they must convert or be killed. Radical Islam cannot survive in an atmosphere of freedom. What woman would choose to be a slave for life? No one. What mother would choose to strap a bomb to her baby or to her son and watch their bodies be blown to bits? Who would do that? Who in their right mind would choose a religion that would burn down churches, bomb buildings, explode airplanes, and kill people in the name of God? This is what radical Islam is teaching. The war for America's survival has begun. Few in America are willing to admit it. Few are willing to address it. But Islam is prepared for this battle for America to last 50 or 100 years. Americans want a war to be over in 6 weeks or 6 months. Now that we've had one in Iraq that lasts 4 years, we have great division in this country because we must understand that the price of freedom is a relentless determination to defend freedom. And there are those who want to take our freedom away from us. Let America heed the words of Winston Churchill, who said in the dark days of World War II, "You ask what is our aim? I can give you our aim with one word. That word is victory. Victory at all cost. Victory in spite of the terror. Victory, however long and hard the road may be. For without victory, there is no survival." And I want to say that to those of you who are watching in the American audience. Victory has to be our theme. Victory in spite of the terror. Victory in spite of how long and how hard the road may be in this battle against global terrorism. Because without victory, there is no survival of this nation for you, for your children, or your children's children. May God preserve the freedom of the United States of America, where we enjoy life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness every day. Then there are people who say, well, I've been taught that Islam, and I'm talking about radical Islam, is a peaceful religion. This information comes from Dave Hunt, one of the great prophecy writers in America. He says, when Muhammad died in 632 AD, much of Arabia, having been forced to embrace this new faith by the sword, tried to defect, thinking that they had the right to quit Islam when they wanted to. They had forgotten the words of Muhammad passed on from Allah, whoever relinquishes his faith, kill him. In other words, whoever tries to quit the church, kill him. I know some pastors who would like to try that. During the next 2 years, from 630 to 632 AD, in obedience to Allah's command to behead apostates, Muhammad's successor and father-in-law, with what he called holy Muslim warriors, killed 70,000 former Muslims. That's not peaceful. When you kill 70,000 people because they try to quit your church, that's not peaceful. Abu Bakr went forth with his troops and said, command them, those who've tried to quit Islam, to re-embrace Islam, but if they refuse, do not spare any of them. I'm quoting now, burn them with fire and kill them with force and take the women as prisoners, end of quote. That's not peaceful. This is a fact of history. Radical Islam is not peaceful. I want to make this very clear. There are Islamic people who want peace, but I'm talking about a radical Islam that is determined to see Western civilization destroyed. In Saudi Arabia, the practice of any religion besides Islam is strictly prohibited, just as it was in the lifetime of Muhammad. Think about this. Saudi Arabia is building mosques in America from coast to coast, from the billions of dollars that Americans are sending over there through our gas tanks. But if you try to worship in Saudi Arabia any god but Allah, you'll get killed. That's a fact. Saudi Arabia has what Hitler was trying to produce, a nation where Jewish people can't even come in, because it's considered that they defile the soil when they touch it with their feet. In July of 1977, an Englishman with a miniature camera was able to take photographs that shocked the world. The public execution in Jeddah of Princess Michelle Mohammed and her boyfriend. She was shot 6 times in the head, and he was beheaded. Western governments hurried to suppress the showing of the film. The point I'm making here, this is not peaceful. Saudi Arabia is the only country that officially practices beheadings for apostasy. By decree from Muhammad, still honored as Islamic law, no Jew may enter Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has, as I've said, accomplished what Hitler dreamed of, a Jew-free society. Saudi Arabian officials promise that they will continue to support Palestinian terrorism against Israel. In April of 2002, the Sheikh of the Saudi Arabian government said in a government mosque, quote, I am against America until this life ends. She is the root of all evil and wickedness on the earth. He's talking about America. Muslim brothers in Palestine, do not have mercy on the Jews, their women, or yours for the taking. To take, Allah has made them yours. Wage holy war and pillage them, end of quote. My friend, that is not peaceful. 15 of the 19 Islamics who murdered 3,000 Americans on 9/11 were from Saudi Arabia. This is not peaceful. We, the people of the United States, must recognize this. There is a war by a very determined enemy, radical Islam, to destroy us, to take our country down. We, the people, must stand boldly and persistently until freedom is defended in our generation.